But sometimes a grieving widow is not a grieving widow. I have another full day of pre-recording today. You guys already know. I'm still stuck on this flavor. It's just so good. In March of 2023, a Utah mother named Corey Richens self-published a children's book. It was called Are You With Me? And it followed a young boy dealing with the loss of his father, exploring the emotions of grief and the idea that those that we loved are somehow always with us. Corey told every single person around her, every single person in her life, that the reasons for her writing that book was to help her own kids coping with the loss of their own father. Months later, Corey Richens was arrested and charged with the death of her husband. Corey and Eric Richens first crossed paths in 2009 in Utah when Corey was only 19 years old. Eric was 27. Described by those who knew him as a hardworking man from a ranching family. He was the oldest of 3 siblings. He had 2 little sisters, and he very much so gave off older brother in the sense that he was always the first person to be there when someone needed help for anything. He was also protective and quite literally would put the people that he loved and cared for above anything else. When the two of them met, Eric was doing just fine. Don't get me wrong, he had experienced his fair share of loss and heartbreak by that point in his life. He had been married once before but was now single, yet love life aside, he had done pretty well for himself. He had his own stone masonry company, one that he owned with one of his friends, which is like a construction business that specializes in building and installing structures made from stone, brick, concrete blocks, or things like that. And apart from that, his family had always been well off. The name Richens in Utah was a pretty well-respected name in their town. All that to say, he was doing pretty well for himself. So when he met Corey, he saw her as someone that he could really see himself building a life with. She was funny, she was beautiful, she was smart, she was everything, and the two of them quickly fell in love. Eric found in Corey someone that seemed to match his energy, and on June 15th of 2013, the two made it official. They married and they signed a prenup agreement on the same day. That prenup would later become one of the most significant, important pieces of evidence in trial. It was a pretty standard prenup. It sounds like basically stating that in the case of a divorce, what was Corey's as far as assets and cash would stay Corey's. Vice versa, what was Eric's as far as assets and cash would stay his. So they would not get anything from each other. However, if one of them passed away, that was a different story because the one left would get the assets and the cash from the other. Everything would be left to the surviving partner. But they didn't have to worry about that because neither of those things would happen. Together, they built what looked like from the outside a picture-perfect life. They settled in a small town in Utah, a mountain town southeast of Salt Lake City, and had 3 sons. Corey was a boy mom and she loved it. Eric ran his successful masonry business. Corey launched herself into real estate. She was buying cheap houses, flipping them, and selling them for a lot more money, and she was doing very well for herself. To friends, neighbors, and families on both sides, they appeared to have it all. The marriage, the house, the good careers, and the cutest children. Their life was a dream come true. But as we know, not everything is what it seems to be, because beneath the surface, cracks in Corey and Eric's marriage were beginning to show. The red flags started when Eric confided in one of his sisters, letting her know that he had reason to believe that Corey was hiding something. Or at the very least, that she was doing something behind his back, specifically when it came to their finances. And he kind of was getting the vibe that she was keeping certain things from him on purpose, which obviously he was not happy about. The trust between the two of them kind of reached this weird gray area, but remember I told you that something about Eric was that he was always going to put the people that mattered the most to him in his life first. Those people to Eric were his children. He wanted and needed to know that no matter what happened, if things did go south in his marriage, his children would be taken care of. And in 2020, Eric made the decision to change his trust. Eric, thinking that he would rather be safe than sorry, quietly consulted with both a divorce attorney and an estate planning attorney to help him out. And what he did was change his trust. He removed Corey as the beneficiary of his $500,000 life insurance policy and designated the trust instead. Eric also made sure that in the event of his passing, everything would go to his 3 boys, managed by his sister Katie, not Corey, again with the intention of being able to protect his sons long term should anything happen. Shortly before the tragic events of today's case, Eric and Corey had been in the middle of a days-long, maybe weeks-long argument. That argument over this mansion monster house was one of the clearest windows into just how broken the Richens marriage had become in its final months and how differently Eric and Corey saw their futures together. That property was not just any house. It was a 22,000 square foot unfinished mansion sitting on nearly 10 acres of land in Heber City, Utah, a stunning stretch of mountain real estate not far from Park City Ski Resort. That estate had originally been built in 2017, but it was never completed. It was abandoned mid-construction and it had been sitting there like a skeleton of someone else's dream. But when Corey discovered it in 2019, she saw a vision: 8 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, a swimming pool, a golf simulator, a rock climbing wall, a basketball court, a home theater, and a separate $4,000 square foot guest house. She saw just how much potential a house of that size had, and she decided that she wanted to make an offer with a group of investors and begin working toward a purchase that would cost nearly $2 million. An accountant reportedly told Corey and Eric that if she were to complete the project and stay on budget, they could, if all went well, they could potentially walk away with a $12 million profit. For Corey, this was the deal that was going to change everything. This was the one. However, Eric, he did not see it that way. Paying bills worth of millions of dollars to put into a house that he wasn't sure of to begin with, it was not a great idea in his eyes at all. He just thought the risk was too high for the unknown, because who's to say that the construction would all go according to plan? Who's to say that they would stay within budget? And who's to say that they then would be able to sell it for as much as Corey wanted to sell it for? No one could say for sure, and he was not ready to risk it. And according to Eric's family, he wasn't just hesitant, it wasn't even an option in his head. He had made up his mind, and his family members claimed that he had planned to tell Corey that they were not going to be buying the mansion at all. Not only that, but he was also planning on telling Corey that she was being cut out of his will that very same day, and he made the decision to cut her out of his inheritance because she was doing fishy stuff behind the scenes. For example, she had tried to switch out their life insurance policy to make herself the only beneficiary without telling Eric. He found out, and then he changed it back. So her behavior was shady, and Eric was not having it. He was still secretly meeting up with that divorce attorney, trying to weigh out his different options while keeping it hush-hush because he didn't want his sons to think that anything was wrong. March 4th of 2022 was a Friday, and that day was the day that Eric Richens was found deceased inside of his own home. On the evening of March 3rd, the night prior, Corey Richens made her husband a beverage. She told investigators that she made it and served it to him because they were celebrating a recent real estate closing. Eric took the glass, he drank it, and according to Corey's account to police, he complained of chest pain before he eventually just headed off to bed and went to sleep. She told investigators that she went to sleep in one of her children's rooms because he was having a nightmare, and woke up around 3 in the morning to eventually go back to her and Eric's bedroom. It was then that she found Eric cold to the touch at the foot of their bed, lying on the floor. She called 911. Corey Richens placed the call to 911 dispatchers at 3:21 in the morning on March 4th, 2022. However, prosecutors would later allege something significant. According to their argument, cell phone data showed that Corey first accessed her phone at 3:06 a.m. but did not dial 911 until 3:21 a.m. That's a 15-minute gap that the prosecution would argue reflected a guilty conscience. On the call itself, Corey can be heard saying, quote, "I just came into bed in our bed and I turned over and he's just cold. He's just so cold," end quote. She told the dispatcher she did not know what happened. When the dispatcher then tried to instruct her to perform CPR, Corey gave excuses as to why she couldn't, at one point saying, quote, "I can't move it, it's just dead weight," and asking, quote, "I'm sorry, can you please send somebody," end quote. Officers arrived at the scene, and it was too late. Eric Richens was gone. He was only 39 years old. Now to backtrack, the story that Corey told authorities on the scene was that her and her husband had been celebrating closing on that $2 million home, right? The following morning, the day after her husband's body was found, Corey signed papers to finalize the purchase of the $2 million mansion for her real estate business. Imagine the shock that investigators felt when they realized that Eric Richens had absolutely no intentions of closing on that home, and quite literally the opposite. He was getting ready to tell Corey that they were not going to be closing on the sale of the house. Add to that all of the other weird, suspicious things that they were starting to discover little by little. It was all painting a very, very dark picture. And the more they found out, the worse things started to look for Corey Richens. Eric's autopsy revealed that he had passed away from intoxication. The level in his system was 5 times the lethal dose. The medical examiner confirmed 2 critical details: that was illicit, meaning that it was not medical grade or prescribed, and that it had been ingested orally. There was no sign of a heart disease, a stroke, or any other natural cause of death. Because of that, the manner of death was ruled a homicide. But despite the autopsy results pointing to clearly someone having done this on purpose, Corey was not immediately arrested. Investigators would spend the next year building the case because they had to make sure that they were correct in what they were starting to believe happened. During that time, Corey continued to live her life publicly. Like I said, she signed papers to close on that mansion, but then she ended up putting it back on the market 2 weeks later. And then in March of 2023, she announced that she was self-publishing the grief book, Are You With Me? Corey Richens appeared on Good Things Utah in April of 2023 to promote her new book, sitting across from the television host, describing her husband's passing as unexpected and difficult, and she talked about healing. But as she was busy appearing on TV, investigators were digging into her and Eric's marriage, and they were finding a lot of valuable, scary information, to say the least. Investigators learned specifically about this one incident that happened in Greece years prior, the same way that they learned about nearly everything else that was suspicious in this case from Eric's own family after he was already gone. When detectives began speaking to Eric's family members, they were told that Eric had believed that his wife had attempted to get rid of him during a trip in Greece several years earlier by serving him a beverage that made him incredibly sick. Imagine that. When that happened, Eric told his sisters about it and said that he thought that Corey wanted him out of the picture. And then the family told investigators that Eric had warned them repeatedly while he was alive that if anything happened to him, his wife Corey would be the person to blame. That Greece story was just one piece of a larger picture that his family painted for detectives, because they also found out that in 2019, Corey took out a $250,000 home equity line of credit against the family home, which was Eric's premarital property, without his knowledge or permission. She had also been withdrawing money from his business accounts and charging his credit cards. When Eric discovered this in September of 2020, he confronted her. She promised to pay it back, but by that point, she had already charged more than $30,000 on his credit and withdrawn at least $100,000 from his accounts. That was around the time that Eric had first reached out to that divorce lawyer. They also found out that Corey had changed the life insurance policy for herself to be the only beneficiary, but then Eric changed it back. But then I think Corey changed it back again, because at the time of his passing, it sounds like Corey was under the impression that she was the only person listed as the beneficiary. She had no idea about Eric's sister's name being on anything, and it's believed that she truly, really believed that she was going to get everything. Corey had also been taking out life insurance policies on Eric without him knowing. Prosecutors alleged that she had secretly taken at least 4 separate life insurance policies on Eric between 2015 and 2017 without his knowledge, with a combined amount of nearly $2 million. In January of 2022, just weeks before Eric's passing, investigators say that she forged his signature to take out yet another $100,000 policy. It also came out just when you think she can't get any worse, Corey was having an affair. In 2020, Corey began a romantic affair with a man named Robert Josh Grossman, who went by Josh. Josh was also involved in real estate, and he worked with Corey on different projects building houses. The two of them discussed dreams of a future together. There were text messages found in which Corey told Josh that she wanted to leave Eric and one day marry him. A text from Corey to Josh reads, quote, "If you could just go away and you could just be here, life would be so perfect," end quote. But the real nail in the coffin was when investigators found a secret phone that Corey had. On said phone was a contact named simply as CL, Carmen Lauber, the woman who cleaned one of Corey's houses that she was flipping. At some point in early 2022, Corey approached Carmen looking for a certain substance she said that she needed as medication for an investor. Carmen connected her with a man by the name of Robert, and the two of them arranged transactions at a gas station in Draper, Utah. The first purchase happened February 11th, 2022, 3 days before Valentine's Day, but Corey came back after that. She wanted something stronger. She used a specific phrase. She asked for, quote, "the Michael Jackson stuff," end quote. The second transaction took place February 26, 2022, and a third and final transaction took place March 9th, 2022, just 6 days before Eric's body would be found. All of that is only part of what investigators discovered throughout their year-long investigation, but finally on May 8th of 2023, over a year after Eric's passing and just 5 weeks after Corey had appeared on that Good Things Utah to promote her grief book, she was arrested and charged with aggravated murder. A judge denied her bail, saying that she was a substantial danger to the community. Her trial began February 23rd of 2026, and it lasted 13 days. Prosecutors calling more than 40 witnesses, the defense calling none. Corey Richens declined to testify in her own defense, and on March 16th, so literally just last week, Corey Richens was found guilty on all counts. She has not yet been sentenced, but yeah. Outside of the courthouse, Eric's sister Amy spoke, saying, quote, "Honestly, I feel like we're all in shock. It's been a long time coming, so just very happy that we got justice for my brother. Our focus is now on honoring Eric's life and supporting his voice as we all continue to heal," end quote. And I know you guys are wondering, it sounds like the 3 sons have been taken by some of Eric's relatives, and I believe they have also filed for guardianship. Yeah. I mean, the guts that she has. And obviously every single case we cover on my page is horrible and terrible and so heartbreaking and sad. But there's just something that really breaks my heart when it's the spouse, because it's like at one point in your life, you married this person, you stood in front of one another, you said your vows to each other, and now this is how everything ends. It's just, It's beyond me. Anyway, that is all I have for today's video. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Eric's story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day and make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.